Good morning, everyone. As Paul Macon just mentioned, we are moving into the technical parts of our event, but uh, it's no reason to switch off. Based on my based on my conversations with many of you, the good thing is even if you are not doing anything technical now, most of you, if not all of you, had technical background, like you worked in technology before and you know how things work, how the technology world works. So it's great. We should be ready to go. Or in worst case scenario, at least you like telling people that they're wrong. So you're at home. So we will talk today about Mojoloop releases. We won't go into the detail on the process, but if you have questions about the process and the quality aspects of Mojoloop, uh, we can always talk about that. So please reach out. But we will talk about what we just published, the Mojoloop releases, some of the enhancements and upgrades that are included in those release. Then we'll look at how do we deploy those, how do we adopt, and then we'll eventually look at the release roadmap as well. So that's going to be our agenda. The primary goal or objectives of this work stream is to make sure that at a fundamental level, Mojoloop works, the software, or the platform, and that it's available for adoption. So we have some of those points here, which are aimed at achieving that fundamental goal. Again, as I said, this is a release cycle we have, but we can go into detail if you want to look at some of those, or if you want to get involved or look at those closer. Put in this slide here to show that we don't take this lightly. This process, we know the value of this ecosystem, the software and the platform, and there are checks at every stage. If you look at this slide alone, hope you can see this. Yeah, so we have several different types of tests. The steps test, like the test coverage units, the licenses, functional tests, we build and we scan the images for vulnerabilities, many things. Even those that are not listed here, for example, on GitHub itself, we have at least 5 to 10 different mechanisms that look for alerts, that look for the quality of the code that's being contributed or published, and gives us metrics on that and gives us mechanisms to address any issues that we find. And our release process itself has about 20 different tasks involved. And the acceptance criteria, it's not visible here clearly, but has at least 10 different items. We'll get to that later. Stephen from the team will talk about how we are trying to automate, or we've automated some of these steps. So that's the reason why I wanted to include this quickly to show that. So Mojoloop Congo version 16 is the Mojoloop release right now. A few days ago or weeks ago, Paul Macon we had some activity, we had some polls where community members voted on the upcoming 4 Mojoloop releases. So the 4 we had were Mojoloop Acacia, Congo, Zambezi, and I think Limpopo. So we've used 2 of those, Acacia and Congo, 2 are upcoming. So in the release, we have the Mojoloop core itself, the clearing engine, the settlement engine, the lookup services, coding, those kind of things. But when we talk about Mojoloop deployment or Mojoloop platform, it includes many different things. We look at gateway, we look at the load balances, identity and access management for role-based access control, security services, finance portal for backend operations, reporting services, deployment support tooling, and dashboards and monitoring tools as well. So David will go into detail on that later on. With that, we'll go into the release automation part, and Stephen from the team will talk about the steps we took to make our process more efficient and reduce the cycle on our release management. Stephen, over to you.
Yep. Thank you, sir. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So my name is Stephen Oderai. I am a software engineer working with Infitex. And for the past 2 releases of ML, I've been responsible for those releases. So if for whatever reason your environment has been broken, you can blame me for that. All right. So during the last PI, we took some time out to automate parts of the modular release process. And I don't know if my slide can be seen. Do I need to share my screen? All right.
Your
thank you.
slide is showing.
Good, thank you. So those bullet points on the slide are basically for some of you that are not familiar with the release process. This is what we do when we release a module. With the exception of the 9th point there, which is inherently a human process, we have been able to successfully automate all of the other 8 steps. And the objective for this automation is we wanted to make sure that we cut off the parts of the process that can be handled by a computer. So basically automate parts that can be automated. And that is exactly what we have done. And in terms of the impact of this, we are able to, for instance, get a release candidate out in a matter of hours and not days, and with almost 0 human effort, which I believe is highly commendable. For the sake of time, I would briefly just go through each of these steps. And for some of you that are interested in the details of the implementation of this automation, you can look at the Helm repository itself. There is a folder within that repository called .github and /workflow. So you can see the details of the automation. So the first thing is that we are now able to automatically update Helm chart packages, and we were able to achieve this using a library called Update CLI. A little shout out to the team that made that library, because it really helped to achieve this goal without us having to re-implement what that library does. Because if it doesn't exist, we would have had to do something similar, and that would have taken us a lot of time. So shout out to the team that made Update CLI. You can check out updatecli.io for more details about the library in case you just might need it. The second point is we are now able to automatically also detect breaking changes between the last release and the next release. We are able to do this by basically detecting what DB migrations have happened between the last release and the current release we're trying to make, and whether the default configurations have changed. The third one is we are now able to also generate the change log between the last release and the current master of Helm chart. And using that information, we are able to determine number 4, which is to determine the next release version. So a case in point is V16 Congo. That version number was actually chosen by the release automation process, and we found it to be very correct, because there are, in addition to new features, there are also breaking changes which were highlighted in the release notes by the process. The 5th one is we are now able to generate the release notes. So this is almost 0 human effort. We are able to pick out the packages that have changed. We are able to generate the diff links and have that within the release note. So also the contributors that have contributed, we are also able to pick those up and insert those in the release note. So basically, we are able to do this without any human effort. And apart from that, number 6 is that we're able to deploy the release candidate to the OSS test environment for validation. And then the release candidate is validated using TTK. So basically, we have the process is able to generate a releasable or a deployable Helm chart package. And then lastly, we create the release candidate pull request from the process. So like I said, the 9th part requires, for instance, if the process picks up a bug during the validation, we will have to, create stories for those bugs, and then someone has to pick up those bugs and fix them. And then the PR reviews is currently being done by a human, and then the final release point, release task is done. So basically, this is what we have been able to achieve. And in terms of the impact so far, for the first time in history, we are able to get a release candidate for Moja Loop within a matter of hours, and it just requires a human being to click a button on the GitHub release workflow and get the RC out. This is exactly how we're able to release, to start the release with V16 Congo. And also, if you're working on the OSS team, you're responsible for the ML releases, your work has just become seriously easier. You can trust me for that. The other impact is that we have higher quality releases because we are now able to get to the bugs faster than before. So we're able to focus on things that humans should do. So with that, I'll say thank you and hand over back to Sam.
Thanks, Stephen. Wow,
Paul,
that's
yes. Sorry.
amazing news. I feel like we need an applause there. One of the foundational agile principles is to be able to release quickly, and now we can. This is not working. Oh, there we go. So I'm going to be quick because I think we're running out of time. So the Congo release 16 includes the performance changes, well, the changes that came out of the performance workstream. So I just want to run down through those very quickly. So I've got a list of 8 of those changes. There's obviously a lot more than that, but just to give you a sense of the type of changes that we're talking about. Some of those are individual components, and that's partly because of how we went about this. What we did is we isolated a component of Moja Loop and then optimized that. Ooh, wow. We then optimized that full performance. We put it under load, understood what characterized it, and then try to optimize it as we could. Then we took all of those parts and put them together into Kubernetes. So point number 6 and point number 8 are really about how we then integrate all those components too. So it's been a bottom-up approach, but you also need to worry about the Kubernetes side. So there's one of these points that I would like to just concentrate on, and that is the transfers position batch handler. And that is considered the critical path in the performance of the Moja Loop system. The job done there was so good that is no longer the critical path. It is now one of the components that is easy to scale and easily meets our requirements. So that means that there's more work to be done. So this is a never-ending work stream, and we now concentrating on upgrading the rest of the system and making it more performance. But it's been a significant step up, before I move to the next slide, I just want to say, why is it important? So performance is important because it allows you to run the system on less hardware. And that obviously, we're really talking about managing the ongoing operational costs of the system. So it's a significant effort. So thanks to that. And now I'm going to hand over to David Fry.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, so I'm going to talk quickly about what was done in this release for the IAC. So I want to quickly recap what is the infrastructure as code's job here. And what we're trying to do is provide a framework of frameworks. And what do I mean by that is standard components that provide the non-functional requirements for running a Mojo loop. So we need storage, we need a service mesh, we need the security, not just for authentication authorization, but also for configuration management. So what we're trying to do is not have any of those dependencies in the application code, but provide all those services within the platform so that when you deploy this, you're able to deploy it in a secure fashion that would an operator would expect to have from this product. So there's two pieces. Control center is what we call, and I have to thank Sam for this analogy, a 3D printer of Mojo loop environments. So it has the templates and it has the, so those templates would be the equivalent of a CAD file. And then the 3D printer is taking those templates and then printing out different environments in a secure fashion. So outside of the CI/CD, it also has private registry and vault and object storage. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move forward quickly and just talk about the summary of the V16 features. So we also have integrated testing with TTK, and this allows us on the successful deployment of the Mojo loop application to test that in a post-sync. Again, as we talked about yesterday, we have the bare metal improvements because that's an important aspect here is to support bare metal. And again, I'm going to move forward because we talked about the Ori stack and the removal of WSO2 yesterday. And I'll also talk about payment manager improvements. Actually, I'll skip that because it is the same IC overall. I'm going to point you to the GitHub repos. I'm going to hand it over to Sam.
Thank you, David. Thanks to the team for all the hard work and making this happen. I want to give a quick snapshot of the Mojo loop release cycle. This is a little bit into the past and stopping at the current one. In the next slide, we'll look at the current and the future. So right now we have Mojo loop Congo V16. This is a kind of a culmination of the performance work streams work. I think Paul was saying we'll continue that work and we might see more updates from that work stream into the Mojo loop release cycle. But this is a good logical conclusion to that. Apart from that, we looked at the automation cycle, automation of the release cycle steps, which gives us more capacity now to do things quickly and also enables us to focus on other things like feature releases, bug fixes, those kind of things. We also looked at the IAC. I think this is a huge milestone, IAC version 5. We've at least two big items I wanted to highlight were we have the new gateway, Istio, moving from WSO2. We have the new identity and access management framework, which is now unified, which can be used by the various portals for role-based access control, along with many other things as well. Hopefully soon we'll be able to get a good understanding of the performance numbers as well. Even in a limited fashion, we have numbers now. The performance work stream has shared those in the past, and their observations are on GitHub as well. Looking into the future a little bit, we do not decide the future version numbers. We let the changes guide us. We follow semantic versioning, and it can be 16.10 or 17. One thing to realize here is when developers say breaking changes, these are not breaking changes for the community as such. Our Mojo loop APIs are usually same as much as possible. They don't change very frequently. And even when they do, we have backwards compatibility except in some very extraordinary scenarios. And we do have migration path even in the case where we have breaking changes. But the version numbers reflect the technology and technical changes in the deployment and in the services as well. In the future, we were looking at primarily two things. The work from the foreign exchange work stream. We already have a standard code for that contributed. We have deployment options for that already. But there's more work, a little bit more work needed for standardization. We're assuming that with our next release that will come up. Merchant payments features that Kareem presented yesterday, they're almost ready. We're just looking to enhance some end-to-end testing, and they're ready to go out as early as this week, probably with V16.10. And we might have more updates from the performance work stream and some bug fixes or upgrades that happen along the way. In the future, another item we talked about yesterday, the last session, was adapting next generation settlement service into current Mojo Loop. That is on the way as well. And apart from that, others are up to the community to decide what is the high priority item for us. We have the sessions today and tomorrow to decide and conclude that, and that'll be part of the release cycle as well. I'll take a pause before going into how we work. Any questions, Miller, please?
Thank you. The question is really relating around how we report out on the outcomes from the performance work stream. I guess without saying, we can't really tell you exactly how fast the system will run in your circumstances, but what we'd like is to be able to characterize the system in terms of fairly round numbers and the specific hardware footprint that we would say is our minimum deployment size. What we had originally, we had a target set for Mojo Loop running on modest hardware would achieve a certain level of performance, 1000 TPS with a certain tail characteristics at 1%, the 1% tail. And I'd like to get a sense of how we're doing against that target. Either is it smaller hardware now and we're doing the same thing, or is it on that hardware we're now doing, 2x, 3x, whatever? Or are we achieving that now for the first time? I don't think we really know where to put the performance of the system in that spectrum. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miller. I'll just add one statement and pass this on to Paul. We've now captured it as part of our Mojo Loop invariants as well in the documentation, which is up for community for feedback to achieve the numbers there. 1,000 transfers sustained for an hour, which simulates like a peak hour period. And along with the other caveats as well, less than 0.1% errors, meaning transfers that take less than a second. There are some variations where do we want to look at just the clearing cycle or the whole end-to-end cycle? That's up for discussion, but I'll pass on to Paul for the details on the numbers.
There. No. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, great. That's always a tricky question and how to give a good answer. There has been significant progress. I think it's the short answer. Are we there yet? Not quite. And does that mean we can't hit those numbers? Yes, we can. But we can't hit the numbers with the full sort of resilient productionized system yet, because there are still outstanding pieces that need to be performance tested. So it's close. And certainly our hope by the next PI to be able to stand up here and have an on-prem easily meet those requirements. But I think Warren wants to say something.
Thank you. If I can, I want to redirect slightly on that, which is to get to the progress, of course, we love that. It's impressive, but we want to get to a point where we're not making a performance guarantee or a commitment to someone, because the hardware plat is going to change dramatically depending on who's using it or for what. What we want to do is indicate that we have tested it to certain levels using certain kinds of hardware, and this is what we've seen. And we don't want to pull back and say, well, we got as far as 250 TPS and, you know, we had to move on to other things. We want to push the system as hard as possible to the point of failure, throwing as much hardware as it is available to us and characterize how it runs at that level and use that as the baseline to which we then narrow over time. That was the original point we wanted with the performance characterization work. Now that you're doing the work to improve performance, we don't want to lose sight of that and be able to go back to that point again. Not so much the 1,000 TPS on modest hardware and so forth. That we still have that target. I get it, but we also want to go that extra level and just push the system hard and say, what is it actually capable of doing in that circumstance? And I'm sorry, and then to Warren, I guess.
Yeah, so just to add to that, I think at the last convening, we reported out that kind of sanity test, and that was taking the core Mojo Loop platform, deploying it onto some modest hardware and driving it to fast. And we exceeded the 1,000 TPS during that example. That still stands as true. What our team has moved on to doing is now moving on to actually deploying it within the IAC environment and full end-to-end kind of transactions with all stages of a discovery, agreement, and transfer phase of a transaction. So now we're trying to, you know, we've raised the game significantly from that critical transfer path. I think in the last PI, we did actually report out this was the hardware stack and this was the numbers. But it's worth going back to that and just refreshing those and making sure that those are called out as a, you know, report out kind of, this is what we did for other people asking the question of, so what should I plan to start with? And as you said, there's not a guarantee as to what your implementation is going to get, but it's the starting point and it should set a baseline for everybody to be confident in engaging in that process.
Thank you, Miller, and thanks, Warren, for the clarification. And Paul, I'll take just 30 more seconds. I have one more question I wanted to ask David. David, so what do you mean by cloud agnostic IAC?
So cloud agnostic means that you have the same code base, same modules that you would deploy on bare metal or on AWS or on Azure. And then you are able to deploy your Mojo Loop on top of that with no, on a application perspective in the GitOps YAML file definitions, there's no reference to what cloud or bare metal that you're deploying into.
So how many different variations have we tested out now?
It's been tested on AWS, it's been tested on bare metal, and on AWS, it's been tested with managed Kubernetes, EKS, as well as homegrown clusters using micro K8s and K3s.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks, David. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out to one of us. But in interest of time, we'll wrap it up here. Just one more section. Maybe we can discuss that in more detail later on. But we follow public working methods. All of our work can be tracked on GitHub. We follow Markdown for documentation, GitHub issues, and we follow Scaled Agile framework for the way we work. These are in the details, but we'll see if we can find more time to go into that. Simeon, is Simeon in the room? If not, it looks like we have two people raising hands for questions, Bonaparte and Kareem and Min. Bonaparte, yeah, please, let's make it quick. While Simeon is out of the room, let's, it's good to be.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I wanted to ask specifically on pipelines. For our deployments that we've done so far, we've been using GitLab. And we to a stage where we want to start setting up CI/CD basically that runs any particular any service that we choose. So we've not been able to find that already. So I will be interested to know if that's that compatibility with GitLab runners is there already, or if there is a version of GitHub that we can easily convert to GitHub.
Thanks, Bonaparte. That's a good question. Maybe you can add a bit more, but we use Circle CI for the open source side of contributions on GitHub. It's always possible that if you have extensions to that, we can have like GitHub Enterprise or other private tools. But also I wanted to touch on one thing is David talked about this, the control center, GitOps, that we use for build pipelines, which have jobs to do various tasks, which would actually make it easy for upgrades, deploying Moduloop in different environments. So we do have some tooling. We can get into the details with you to see if that satisfies your requirements or if you need more. Thank you. Karim?
Yeah. So I had a few questions. I don't know. I mean, we have got much time, but so as a product, when we 16 is released, I tried to look at it, the product feature list. If we have some kind of list, if it's there, I could not find it. And one thing which I'm not clear is about a user interface. What's the priority for that for hub operator and participant both? I'm coming from the perspective that being involved in several payment system implementations, this is normally a priority for the adopters that they want to have that user interface as part of the core product, even for participants as well. Yesterday, I saw some user interfaces, but I understand that is built as part of the participant tools on which will get deployed on their side of the infrastructure. But the central infrastructure, does it have a mechanism where the transactional data or the positions data is stored in a kind of repository where it can be used for user interfaces, reporting, for fraud analysis or different kind of analysis, which do not hit the transactional data, which is used for the real-time transaction processing. So that was a question. Maybe, I mean, a detailed answer may take some time, but if that information is available somewhere, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Karim. Yeah, so I'll keep the answer very short and we'll pass on to the next session, but we can discuss details. So we have finance portal right now. So when we talked about the IEC release 5.0.0, so this is deployed on the Moduloop switch. It's all the portals there are what can be used for backend operations. So there is transactional data that can be queried. Participants can be onboarded. We can generate reports. So all this is available. It's deployed on the core as part of our IEC deployment. It can be deployed separately as well, but it's there. Yeah, thank you. With that, Simeon, we'll pass on to you for the next session. Thank you.